Live from the rooftop of the Hermann London Real Estate Group in beautiful downtown Maplewood, it's the St. Louis Realtor Podcast with your host, Adam Kruse.
Welcome to this week's Hermann London Real Estate Group St. Louis Realtor Podcast. This is episode 14, and we are recording live from the Hermann London Studios in beautiful downtown Maplewood, Missouri. I am excited about today's guest, a little nervous to be honest, a little intimidated, I guess I would say. But we have Alex Ihnen on the program today. He is the owner and I'm supposing main author of NextSTL.com, NEXTSTL.com. And Alex is sitting here in our studios with us. So, Alex, will you do me a favor and introduce yourself? Tell us a little something.
Yeah, thanks for having me. For people in St. Louis, is that mainly your audience? It's around the world. It's global.
It's around the world.
It's
global. I mean, every realtor in the world listens, and all investors.
So for Missourians, I'm a Hoosier, and not that kind of Hoosier. I'm an actual Hoosier. So lay off. You know, that's like it's overwhelming. I've been here a decade, and I'm not over it.
You already saw on my questions that I was going to say you went to Indiana, but could you not get into Mizzou, or what happened? This is the.
I have a journalism degree too. I hear does Mizzou have a journalism school?
Yes, they do.
Just kidding. I was just afraid to go far from home. You know what? I actually looked at Rolla. I was going to go be an engineer because my dad's an engineer. I was an engineer for 1 year, and then I wisened up, but not at Rolla.
Okay, I'll tell you, they can drink some beer down at Rolla. That's for sure.
Yeah, what else is there?
There's nothing else to do, I guess.
Okay.
What can you tell us about yourself?
What can I tell you? I didn't go to high school here. I grew up in northern Indiana, followed my girlfriend, now wife, here about 11 years ago.
Okay.
She came here to do a PhD at Washington University. Let's see, 2 houses, 3 children, and several degrees later, we're still here. So.
Okay.
Yeah, I got bored, so I wanted to start writing about development and kind of get engaged in the community. So I started the website, another iteration of it maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and wrote every day for about 3 years, and then it's kind of evolved from there.
And so is this your full-time job?
No, I lose money doing this. So this is my hobby. This is my addiction, obsession, whatever it is. So I've been in fundraising for a while, and I'm starting something new maybe as early as next week. So you'll have to check LinkedIn or something. We
should have had you on next week so you could announce it maybe.
It could have been big.
Do you fundraise for charities, or do you fundraise for...
Well, I worked for Indiana University. I worked for the University of Missouri St. Louis. I've worked for Washington University, and then also the Contemporary Art Museum in town. So here and there.
So I guess you're making phone calls, you're networking. It's
probably... for Washington University, I was traveling. I covered New England, Florida, and Ohio, and met with alumni and did events and things like that. And then the art museum was much more local interest, but doing individual face-to-face fundraising.
I hope you have kind of an easy time doing that, because if you called me, I would have been like, let me stop what I'm doing and take this call, because honestly, I think I've been to a few things where you were a panelist. I'm kind of friends with Frank DeGraff from Count on Downtown, and so, which he's not doing that anymore anyway. So you're the man now.
Count on Downtown Raleigh, I guess, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Frank is listening to this. He's in North Carolina now, so
I think Frank does listen. I hope. You never know. I'm not sure. So you got into this just as kind of a hobby? Yeah,
I mean, the main thing was I lived in Forest Park Southeast at the time I started this, and I went to a neighborhood meeting about a Drury hotel proposal, which is still kind of a live idea that may eventually happen. But this is, 5, 6 years ago, and there were 200 people at a community meeting, and I kind of was kind of jazzed up about it, thinking like, here's this big proposal in my neighborhood. It's kind of exciting. It's a couple blocks away. Some people hated it. Some people loved it. And it was just kind of an energizing experience. And I went home and thought, I can't wait to read about this in the news tomorrow. Of course no one covers stuff like that, Local media doesn't cover events like that, and certainly not the early discussions about development like that. Talked to neighbors about it, and they kind of were like, oh, where do I find out more? I'm like, oh, there is no place. And, that was about the time where you could finally, hit a couple buttons and voila, you had a website. Right. So you start you go to Google and you get a Blogspot website, and off you go. So that's what I did.
Looking through your website, it's always interesting. You seem to be the first to know. Maybe I'm the last to know, but you seem to be the first to know about a lot of these projects. Do you go to every neighborhood meeting across town? I mean, you know about all the stuff, right?
No, it's in a sense, it's evolved to the point where I get a lot of information sent to me. I mean, people aren't out looking for me, but they're at a neighborhood meeting like I was 5 years ago, and they say, a developer just came and told us what was happening with this warehouse. What do you know about it? Or here's what they told me. What more can you find out? And, information is generally available. And to be honest, I don't do a lot of of deep digging. There's not a lot of, phone calls and meetings and things like that. It's a lot of the stuff is available publicly. So, we have so many municipalities in St. Louis region. So, I check the Clayton City website regularly. I, look for the preservation board agenda the day it's out for the city. So a lot of this stuff is public. It's just not something that people, you're not going to pay attention to all this stuff. You're not going to bookmark 17 websites and see what Richmond Heights and Maplewood and Clayton and all these people are up to every week. Right.
Right.
So I do that. I have other people who kind of are checking other, building permits and things like that as they come through. So it's generally public stuff, but then I get other people who've, they enjoy the site and they're asking questions. So I can get a lead.
So it's kind of like the information's out there. You just sort of have to know how to find it.
A lot of it. Yeah.
And you said you were going to be an engineer, but obviously you're sort of a technical, analytical type guy. And I noticed that because when I'm reading through your articles, it's not just, there might close down some streets on Gravois. I don't like that. You've got graphs, we've got pictures, we've got charts, right? You get in depth with some things, and I'm sure people appreciate that.
Well, it's one of the things that just tells the story. It's easy to write, and like I said, when I was doing something every day, a lot of times it was a YouTube video about a roundabout in 75 words, right? And I've kind of evolved, and I have to stop from writing more because I get into some of these things, and I can write 3,000 words about street closures, and no one's going to read that, But if you can show those pictures, it really tells the story, and that's the frustrating thing locally in media. Is that, everything from our biggest paper to some other website can say, hey, there's an apartment complex coming to Clayton. They don't even put a picture with it,
Right.
Or they put one really bad, small, old picture with it or something. It's just kind of
just
like
whatever they can find online.
Yeah, you're not really telling anyone the story, and you're not really giving anyone information. So you have to, I don't know. I view it as pretty basic, but it's not always done. So yeah, the more you can illustrate what's happening, the more people are going to understand it.
Okay, so I've noticed you have information on there, like basically a picture of a boarded up house, and you're like, this boarded up house is going to be rehabbed, right? And then there's information like the whole really in-depth article about the streets closing on Gravois. What is your sort of criteria for the website, or how do you choose what makes the cut? Because if you can't write about every house that's going to be rehabbed, right?
Right. No, a lot of things are, the rehab houses and some of those are basically permit based. A permit comes into the city and is issued to rehab a house, and that's how we find out about it. So that's just kind of a blurb that we like to throw out there, just so people, taking one step back, I think I look at it as we're trying to create a larger narrative about what's happening in the city and the region. Okay. So there are the little house rehabs, but then there are the big transportation issues, and there are, sports stadium issues. There's all kinds of things, right? So it's a little bit like we don't exclude much of anything. The challenge is getting people to write. So I write less than I did before, maybe twice a week, maybe 3 times if a lot's happening. And there are a couple other contributors who write every week, maybe.
I was going to say,
but if someone emails me and says, hey, I've got this story here, I wrote it, it's probably going to get published, Okay.
So. And you sort of proofread it and make sure it's up to your quality standards, I suppose. So now you've built a team of writers, I guess, that are just writing. They're passionate about things like you are.
Yeah, and I think it's hard. I went through journalism school and have now I've been writing, especially for the website, a lot, and it's hard to get people to write. So I've probably had 80 meetings with people who say they want to write, they have this great idea, and then they kind of stumble around a story for about a month and a half and never get it finished. Which it's easy to lose track of just how difficult it is to write and edit and things like that. So yeah, so I try to tell people like it's an open submission process in a way. I mean, people send me stuff all the time. Some of it I spend a lot of time editing. Some of it I don't edit much at all. I just proofread. From my point of view, from the back end, it's a bit of a kind of a hodgepodge and not, we don't have like, hey, Tuesday we're going to write about historic preservation. Wednesday we're writing about transportation. There's a ton out there. I mean, the reality is there's so much information out there, and there's so many projects happening that there's no shortage of things to write about. I mean, I wish I could write twice as much. I mean, there's a lot happening in St. Louis.
And you have analytics on your site. What would you say the most popular section of the site is, or kind of the most, what gets the most traffic? What's like the best article that you've ever had,
Well, we don't do much to pursue things like that, but the things you see is like I can write about, a $200 million tax proposal, and it kind of gets a lot of yawns, or the hospital system, the Barnes Jewish Hospital in the Central West End is spending $1 billion on buildings in 10 years. And it's kind of like, yeah, that's what they do, Yeah. And then you write about a bar closing, mention the word IKEA, talk about the Cardinals, anything like that. I mean, it's pretty predictable in St. Louis, and then everybody goes nuts. And, it's the same as across social media. Those are the things that people share with their friends, that a bar is closing or that IKEA is opening or something like that. So that's what you see. You see things take off at that point.
I guess those are the things that are sort of easier for people to chew on, right? And when they're reading your website, they don't necessarily want to get up in arms about the $1 billion being spent on something. But they can get up in arms and start a Facebook group about the Village Bar closing.
They can, yeah.
Right?
Oh, the poor Village Bar.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about that, and I'm going to talk about that with you in a little bit, if you don't mind.
Sure.
There's not necessarily a most popular area of your website, basically.
No, it's kind of those stories that people have memories of going to a place. It's something that they're personally passionate about. And so, if it was just if I could kind of rearrange the site and spend all the time I wanted on one area, it would be more policy-based. It would be more... trying to give background to why people should care, how wide their sidewalks are, why people should care if a street is open or closed. I mean, that's the stuff I'm passionate about and I want people to know more about. That's not the most popular stuff on the site at all. So it's a balancing act.
Okay. And I guess that's probably a little frustrating where the stuff that you're really passionate about, you want to make change. You want to use your website as sort of a platform to get this information out there. But you have to be able to get people to take action from the site or care or write a local politician.
I have to be realistic just about how much time to spend and the expectations of results. So I've done some of these panels and people have said, tell me about 3 stories that changed a project or made a big difference. And I always kind of struggle with that a little bit because I think it's more about creating a community that's aware of these things so that, when a neighborhood hears about a change to their street, people are a little bit more aware of options and at least understand they can get engaged, or someone else learns like, hey, I can look at the Clayton City website and find proposals, 3 months ahead of the first meeting. That's what I love to see happen. And so I don't know. I mean, I totally bail out at that point, kind of take a step back and realize I write about this stuff. I hope people, sometimes there's something specific that people can take action with, but it takes a community to kind of take an issue and run with it. So it's, I don't try to do it myself, and I don't try to get out there and say, hey, follow me. We're going to achieve A, B, and C. So,
but I guess you're bringing awareness and you're giving people an opportunity to know about something and sort of educating them that they can find more information out. And
I always say that, to be completely honest, this is a pretty selfish endeavor. I started writing about this stuff because I wanted to read more about it and I wanted to learn more. So, so there's that too. I do it because I like doing it. And, if 200 people read the website a day, that'd be awesome. And if 2,000 people read it a day, that's cool too. So
it's like a fun hobby for you too.
Yeah.
I suppose.
Yeah. No, I enjoy it.
So I have a couple projects I want to ask you about, just from looking through your website and from discussions I've had with some other people. And I'm interested, it sounds like, you're the guy to ask about this type of thing, but what are they thinking about doing to the Crestwood Mall?
So the mall itself will go away. So
okay.
They're just taking it down, and the proposal that the city of Crestwood released today is basically a strip mall and some restaurants and then about 250, I forget the exact number, of apartments kind of on the east end of the site. And then the rest of it's kind of they call it open space, but it's basically water retention, rain garden, a small community garden place. So
because the mall basically failed, I guess.
Yeah, and this is what's amazing that we've been writing about on the site. And this is a great example looking at Crestwood of what we want to bring awareness to is that, we write about Crestwood and there's always one or two or however many people who jump up and like, hey, like, why are you trashing Crestwood? It's a great place to live. Like, the schools are highly rated and blah. We're like, well, yeah, but every community, no community is static, right? So You're either growing or declining all the time, and you have to be aware of kind of these future threats. So Crestwood Mall obviously produced a lot of tax revenue for Crestwood for a very long time, and it's producing almost zero right now.
Right.
And what's shocking about the mall is seeing this larger trend nationally away from these shopping centers, and especially ones that are not on major interstate traffic routes, is that mall less than 10 years ago was assessed at $25-30 million. It sold for $3.6 million.
Wow.
It's a huge site. 1 million square foot mall sold for $3.5 million.
Right.
There are homes, not too far from where we're sitting right now that sell for $3.5 million.
Yeah, not too far from there either.
And we don't know, things might be kind of flipping on their head in St. Louis where, the IKEA site that's going into a location that no one would have believed 2 years ago is on about 20 acres that sold for, I think, about $1 million an acre. So you take this urban kind of site where people laughed at the idea of like, oh, there's a Salvation Army across the street, there's a Goodwill next door, nobody wants this, sold for exponentially more than Crestwood Mall site. So you start looking at these values and these trends, and the point is that there are challenges facing all St. Louis communities, and to act like there aren't, or to act like we're Crestwood and these aren't our problems, or we're fine, or it's been great to live here for 20 years, so the next 20 years are going to be just as good, is a little bit silly.
So the Crestwood Mall story in itself is kind of interesting, but you're saying that it's points out what's happening on the bigger picture. And
right.
Okay.
Well, St. Louis has had 7 or 8 indoor malls completely decline and fail. And you go back, you don't have to go back that long. I mean, I was born in 1977. Like, I would have been cruising the mall in the mid 80s and late 80s, and that was like downtown Crestwood, if there is one, right? It was the mall, and it was packed. And you go forward 20 years and it's closed. I mean, that should shock people. That should really open some eyes.
But I guess, so the story isn't, they're going to tear down this abandoned building and put some retail and some apartments in there. What do you think the bigger story is?
I think the bigger story is what kind of development pattern is viable long term. So that mall started in the 40s or 50s. I mean, it was an early mall. It was enclosed in the mid 80s, and then failed 20 years later. So what should Crestwood be doing so that 20 years from now they don't have a 100-acre site that's abandoned again, that generates no tax revenue or generates very little for the size of the site?
What should they be doing?
I think it should be more dense, I think. I think there should be more apartments. I think there is no downtown Crestwood, and it could be a walkable area. It could be maybe like the north side of Kirkwood, the north part of downtown Kirkwood. Right. And that doesn't mean there's no parking or anything. It just means that this could generate more revenue for the city of Crestwood. And Crestwood, without retail revenue, is facing some challenges. You're not going to survive just on, property taxes and things forever.
So I'm sure this goes deeper and deeper and deeper, but so who do you think the decisions, who made this decision? Is there kind of a local mayor, or who made this decision
it's a balancing act. I mean, so maybe this is the best they could do right now, right? So because a vacant site does them no good at all. Right. And they're adding residential and some what are supposedly like luxury apartments, and that's probably a great option for Crestwood, where there isn't maybe a place to live for people who are looking for that type of home. And so but the mayor and the city council have to deal with the residents of Crestwood, and they don't necessarily want apartment towers or, I don't know, some of these developments, so they're a little bit like, if you divided up and built single family homes, they'd probably be happy, but they want places to shop. They probably want a grocery store and things like that. So It's always a balancing act. So, and this is, I think, is part of what people miss on the website, is in many ways we try to be very cognizant of reality, whether it's political reality or economic reality, and then try to ignore it. I mean, like we understand the limitations, but we also seek to be very aspirational. And so whether it's closing streets or rebuilding a mall site, part of the issue is like trying to explain what's possible and what really are the options, instead of sitting back and being like, the city council told us like this is kind of the best we can do, so who am I to say? Well, we're all residents of the region. I think we all should be informed and kind of weigh in more often than we do.
I guess that who am I to say is sort of the lethargic or whatever attitude that is probably really frustrating to you when you write these articles about these big things happening, and people just can't quite get behind it because they're sort of like, who am I to deal with that, right? Okay, well, you mentioned IKEA. I mean, were you obviously, everyone was surprised maybe with that location, but what do you think IKEA has? It's funny because it's just a business, right?
Sure.
It's just a business it's just a big warehouse store, basically, but it's done so much for that area, right? Do you think it's increased property values? What do you think it's done?
Yeah, I think it's done a lot. And in fact, at the time that was announced, there were other developments, retail on the east side of Vandeventer and some other places. And in a sense, that is stalled because they're trying to maximize the price they get. So I think retailers that they were looking at initially were maybe lower end or lower rent retailers, and now that the building's up, they're basically able to go back and say, we told you the rent would be X, we just added $10 a square foot to it, So I think that's going to take some time to shake out. But yeah, I think what people don't realize, especially in that central corridor, is that it's only, you got to imagine it's a 1/10 developed. I lived in Forest Park Southeast in 2006, and people at that time kind of thought like, it's better than it used to be, and it's kind of done, and yeah, there were some vacant buildings, but it was like not even getting started yet, and there's not going to be a lot of demolition in that area, but the amount of vacant land, the amount of empty buildings is massive. And what the hospital has planned, what Washington University has planned for Cortex, they're adding 15,000 more jobs, 2,000, 3,000 more apartments. It's a massive change.
Can you just sort of tell me a little bit about that? I hear a lot about Cortex.
Yeah.
I saw pictures of my friends down at the openings and all that kind of stuff. But what is the deal with all that?
I mean, it's a collaboration between lots of entities, from the Botanical Garden to the University of Missouri St. Louis to St. Louis University. But it's basically 120 acres of space that was light industrial and warehouse space, right? Kind of at the nexus between Midtown, which is St. Louis University, the Washington University Medical Campus. The Botanical Garden isn't far away. They do a lot of plant research science. So these groups basically got together, and the city passed an ordinance declaring this a redevelopment area. And so for those institutions, what that means is there's no demolition review. There's a large pool of tax increment financing, so that allows them to recoup any of the sales taxes or other taxes generated by their development, so they can redo sidewalks and redo lights. So it basically became, 100 acres of whatever they wanted to do with it. And they were able to turn that and bring in, technology jobs, lure the Cambridge Innovation Center there, which is basically a hub for entrepreneurial groups and startups. So it's become kind of the center of technology job growth in the region.
So they said, here's 100 acres, do whatever you want to do with it, and basically we'll help you pay for it.
Pretty much, yeah.
But is this a good example of, like, hey, that was a good thing that it happened, versus sometimes where you're probably like, I wish they wouldn't have.
Yeah, no, I think it's not 100% positive. There's certainly some things I would change about how they're developing, but it's a great thing for St. Louis. So, and it's already become a model for what other places are trying to do. And for better or worse, St. Louis is at a point where you can get these things. I mean, think about, Johns Hopkins, medical school, or Carnegie Mellon or Cornell, or these places are in geographic locations, or Harvard. You don't find 100 acres in Boston, right? So we have this incredible opportunity to grow, and so we're at a point where it's kind of like our past decline is now an opportunity, and hopefully we take advantage of it. And because we don't have a chance to redo it. There isn't a second 100 acres that we can redevelop.
Is there another area of our town that you think is kind of ready to go for something like that, or a good opportunity for something like that?
So, I mean, the near north side is clearly an opportunity area, but it's north of, starting about the Pruitt-Igoe site, the Paul McKee north side regeneration stuff. But
where is he with that? Side note.
Well, he's currently not paying his taxes on anything he owns, and is being sued by a bank, and nothing's happening.
Okay, I saw a presentation from him about a year ago or so when the new library downtown opened up, and he had lots of big plans. Sounded like he was doing a lot of good things, but not.
Yeah, I mean, we're going on a decade of it, and he owns 1,000 pieces of land. The city sold him another 1,000 pieces. He has redevelopment rights for 1,500 acres, and he's done virtually nothing with it over a decade. And you're looking at, from a real estate point of view, he had the excuse of the economic downturn and maybe the reality of it for several years, but we're in a real boom period in St. Louis now. I mean, you have cranes dotting the skyline everywhere, and he can't get a Dollar General built,
So is it sort of like he wants to do it all or nothing? Is he sort of waiting till he can do the whole plan?
What he said from the very beginning is he's in the business of luring jobs to a location. So his entire premise was, if he could get, like he did in Winghaven, if he could get MasterCard or somebody to relocate 4,000 jobs to his development, then he would spin off everything. I mean, he's not a builder.
Right.
So if he could lure jobs, get a big office building built or a corporate campus, then he could sell lots to a developer who then would build houses and other things. He's always said he's in the business of luring jobs, and it hasn't happened at all.
It's kind of like a chicken or an egg thing, right? Because someone doesn't want to put their big company in an area where their employees don't want to go. I
mean, the amazing thing is that most of what Paul McKee owns is not, I don't find the right words for it, but it's not dangerous. It's empty. It's not where the violence in the city is. It's not where it's scary. Well, it's scary to walk because it's empty. Like, there's nothing there.
Right.
I mean, you have 7 vacant lots between 2 occupied houses or something, and very few businesses. So the potential's there. And it started off, even skeptics thought, well, at least one person will control the development rights, which is a positive thing. So when you look at the way St. Louis was developed, you had 25-foot wide lots, and you had thousands of them, and you had hundreds and hundreds of different owners. So you just couldn't build anything,
right?
And so what he has been able to do is aggregate all these lots. So he owns 2,000 pieces of land, which should be good, but now it needs to be in someone else's hands. So, and
what do you think should happen with that area?
I mean, hopefully the land stays together, like I said, with a single owner. But I think you have to it's not. There's potential even with a single owner of all of it. But what they need to do is take a step back and really open up development opportunities to other people instead of trying to direct everything through one entity. I mean, it's too big of a project, and you can't bite off big pieces at a time.
Well, just like what happened in Cortex, like you said, lots of different groups came together to kind of do something great. And maybe that needs to happen here?
Yeah, I just think there has to be, I don't know, you need to start experimenting. I mean, the way that better growth, I think, happens is when you do have competing entities or just a wide range of ideas. Instead of having one developer who comes and says, oh, we're going to build a greenway here and we're going to build houses on these 7 blocks and a corporate campus on these 3 blocks, it's too prescriptive. And so no one gets excited about it. No one else is invested in it. So he's the only person who, is trying. And that's not a bad thing. I mean, I admire him for what he's tried to do. But my God, it's obviously not working. And since he's had control of this site, you'd be nuts to buy something. I mean, you could go in and buy someone's house in that site now, but you'd be crazy to do it because he has the development rights for the whole area. And, everyone kind of sits back and waits for him to make it happen.
Well, what does that mean exactly? He has the development rights. He can just come in and eminent domain and take your property, or he doesn't have
potentially.
To do that?
They're looking at doing that now for the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. They're looking at using eminent domain for, I don't know, they're 35 or 45 occupied homes in the area and things like that. So, but yeah, redevelopment rights just means that he has, the city's given him first option to buy any vacant land, any city-owned land, to really plan the development of the area.
So if another group comes in and they want to do something with that area, will they have to buy all of that from him?
He would sell off parts of it. I mean, this is what he should be doing, is probably selling off corners and things like that. But he's trying to take the 3 or 4 presumably more marketable intersections and get a high price for them. So he has a lot of money invested now, but he's trying to, I think he's, I don't know. The market's not supporting what he's trying to do, obviously. So,
okay.
Yeah, but that's an opportunity. The thing that's shocking is people don't realize its proximity to the rest of the city. I mean, you're 3 miles from downtown, maybe, probably 2 miles, and a lot of what he has. He owns things actually right on the north side of downtown, but it's a great location, so there's clearly opportunity there. But when you look across St. Louis, I mean, there's vacancy on the south side. There's vacancy just north of the Loop area, which is obviously successful in a lot of ways. So, so it's hard to be optimistic about his, development.
I've spent a lot of time down in that area, and I've always been surprised how close I really am to downtown. Because I'm in an area where I'm a little bit scared, or it's a little bit abandoned, or whatever. And then you turn around, and there's the Arch, or there's the Met Building, or whatever. So yeah, it's right there.
It's strange.
Oh, my friend wants me to ask you about, what do you think about the raised highways between the Dome and the river? I'm sure you're familiar with all that stuff.
So for years I worked on a group that's still in existence, but not a lot of hard work happening with it, called City to River.
Oh, you were involved in that?
Yeah, and so it was myself, and I chaired it for a while, and then still stayed on the committee. So there were about 5 of us that did presentations, and we had a moment where, kind of coinciding with the Arch redesign of that area, we went to every business and every entity up and down I-70, and everyone signed on in support of the idea of removing that stretch of interstate, except for one hotel. And we thought we had this moment where it was like, oh, we've got all the support we want, right? We had some political support. We had all the owners of buildings along there, and they were dreaming of what they could do with the highway gone. And then politically, we just totally got, I don't know, trumped, run over, whatever you want to say, by the City Arch River effort. So, the city, through the mayor's office and other people, had decided, this is our chance to redo the Arch grounds. So they're kind of in charge of development and what happens, and they were certainly opposed to our idea. So
they were opposed to it, or they just kind of want to do the
city? I think they were opposed to it. I think they felt it was a threat to their project getting done. So, I mean, they were doing a lot of heavy lifting, trying to raise millions and millions of dollars. And I think the idea on their end was, if this idea that these guys are bringing gains any traction, it's going to delay our plan. It's going to take away money from our plan. It's going to interrupt what we're trying to get done. So,
what is the problem with the way it is now?
There's a problem with the interstate really separating our riverfront from downtown. So if you're a pedestrian, I mean, it's easy to look at a map and be like, oh, you just crossed the street. But the experience of walking along that stretch of interstate is pretty deadening. And you only have to look at what faces the interstate to understand the effect. So you look at a hotel, its back is towards the Arch. It's the back of the hotel, like the service entry and stuff is like facing the Arch, facing the river. It's a very unpleasant experience. You're walking on broken sidewalks and through gravel and stuff.
Right.
There are no restaurants or businesses facing the Arch. You you would think from outside St. Louis, and I thought this before I moved here, is that I'm gonna grab a coffee and sit in a sidewalk cafe and look at the Arch.
Right.
It should be shocking that you can't do that, and it's because you have this this elevated interstate, a trench, and then an elevated interstate again. And then the plan, unfortunately, ended up being to remove some of these downtown streets, which I always thought were pleasant enough to walk on, even across Memorial Drive.
Right.
And they've basically disrupted the street grid and rerouted traffic a block west, which if you're visiting the Arch, you still have to cross it. So it's just poor planning, I think. But it was one of these things that I think happens too often here, where it's a plan that's hatched and endorsed and maybe even partially funded before anyone catches wind of it. And then what do you do? So.
Okay, so I guess the idea is that you'd be able to walk out of the dome and kind of walk across some streets there, and there'd be more businesses and more buildings and more people.
I think you look at
Millennium
Park in Chicago or Michigan Avenue in Chicago as an example. People always complain about the traffic here. Michigan Avenue handles 50 to 60,000 cars a day and tens of thousands of people walking and spending money. Kings Highway, between the Central West End and Forest Park, handles about 50,000 cars a day.
Oh, wow. Okay.
People cross it to go running. It's not scary. It could be better.
Right.
But no one's just like, oh, God, I really wanted to go to the park today, but it's just a scary street to cross.
Right.
know?
There's this huge wall.
Yeah, and the whole premise of the City Arch River project is that you're spending almost $400 million on the Arch, and as a result, 1 million more visitors will visit downtown per year. That's the economic premise, that this is going to pay off because 1 million more people visit and go to restaurants and stay in hotels. So on one hand, they're saying everyone's going to visit downtown, and to walk around downtown, you cross a street every 250 feet, right?
Right.
But then they're saying that people wouldn't visit the Arch because there was just one more street to cross, I just can't imagine coming here and crossing 28 streets, going to a baseball game, and then being like, oh, the Arch is over there.
This whole street I have to cross.
Yeah, next time, we'll come back later, next time.
Okay.
So I don't know. I think it's just it's a missed opportunity.
Well, let's talk about the Village Bar.
Yeah.
Is that
I don't know much about it other than it's under contract. So
is that sort of another small example of redevelopment that's happening? This is a bar that's been around forever.
Yeah.
A lot of my friends and I myself used to go there a lot, and then now the owners who said we'll never sell, they've died and their kids are just selling it out, selling it off.
I think so some of it just happens that there's generational turnover and these things that people swore would never happen. There's nothing, things change. So I think it marks, it's kind of sad for a lot of people, but I think it's somewhat inevitable. So I think you look at, there are other examples around town, bars that were institutions for a long time, but they happen because someone's passionate about it, and and eventually they get sold. And you look at development patterns around the Village Bar. Obviously, it kind of doesn't fit anymore, right? The road's been widened once, if not twice. There's big retail development around there, so at some point it's valuable enough with a different use that somebody buys it and whatever.
It doesn't exactly fit. It doesn't, but that's what's cool about it. Instead of going to Applebee's or Elephant Bar, you go to the Village, the Villaggio.
No, but these are, this is what's frustrating is that ultimately there's an economic argument to be made about all these developments, whether it's Gravois or whether it's Crestwood Mall or something. But then there's also a political side of it. And what people don't realize is that whether it's the Department of Transportation or the Streets Department or I don't know what municipality the Village Bar's in. Do you know?
De Pere.
It's in De Pere, of course it is. So, but De Pere does the zoning and land use, and all that's a political decision. There's nothing that says this has to be for this use or has to be zoned for this use or you have to get an exception for this. Those are political decisions. And so, if people were involved and there were people who cared about having small businesses along there and sidewalks in front of them or something like that, elect people who also think that. But otherwise, these things happen. And again, people step back and think it's inevitable or just, it's sad, but that's just what happens. Well, it doesn't have to be that way.
It doesn't have to be that way. I think most people are sad, particularly about the Village Bar, just because they have so many good memories there,
Yep.
And not because we don't want the Chipotle or whatever is probably going to go in there, because I'm sure I'll go eat at that Chipotle.
Right, but if you ask people, do you want to sacrifice the Village Bar for a Chipotle?
No, they can put a Chipotle anywhere else.
And that's what you don't realize when some of these discussions that we try to have on the website just are kind of boring because they're land use and they're zoning and they're taxation issues, but those are the things that matter if you want places like the Village Bar to stay. And then sometimes things happen because, people die and ownership changes and there's nothing, you can do. So.
Right. I've asked you about a few different projects, and I basically hit the highlights from your website, right? What are some of the other biggest projects or changes or trends going on that you want the public to be aware of?
I think real awareness about what St. Louis could be. I think what's unfortunate on the site is we engage in quite a few critiques of buildings that are built or redevelopment plans, and it's easy to find things wrong or find things that we don't like. So we do spend quite a bit of time on that. But in our mind, in my mind, it's always couched in what's possible and what opportunities we have in front of us. That's right. And so I want people to be aware of other options and understand that, there are great ideas in Indianapolis. There are great ideas in Columbus, Ohio. There are great ideas in Boston. There are great ideas in Paris that we can use.
Right.
And so just bringing this awareness to what could be, and that the way the city is now is not the city, whether that's Clayton or Crestwood or St. Charles. These are all choices that individuals made, and they're small choices that dictate our daily experience. So there's a Shop and Save across the street here, which that didn't have to be there. It was a Kmart, right? I think before that. But the other side of the street where we're located is this row of vibrant shops that I guarantee create a lot more tax revenue for Maplewood than the Shop and Save does, right? Roads through the city of St. Louis have been widened multiple times. Places are being torn down probably this week that don't need to be torn down. None of these things are inevitable. So people need to be aware, I think, of how great St. Louis could be, how we need to maybe control the narrative of the city a little bit more. I've been using the example of Memphis, Tennessee. I was there almost 2 years ago now, and love everybody in Memphis if you're listening. But we came away feeling like this is a dirty. Like, it looked like there was a parade downtown the day before or something. It was just dirty everywhere. It was totally empty. We walked around downtown, didn't see another soul until we you step into the Peabody Hotel and there's 1,000 people staring at ducks. Right. Great. You leave the hotel, no one's around. Right. You drive past used car dealerships and strip malls to get to Graceland. Tons of people there. You go to, then you leave and you just go through kind of depressing areas and you get to Sun Records. Well, that's awesome that Sun is there, surrounded by kind of junk, right? St. Louis has everything, right? We have, go to the Blue City Deli, go to Soulard, go to Lafayette Square, come to Maplewood. It's an amazing place, and somehow we don't tell that story. And we need to start connecting these places. So I don't know. People need to be aware of just what we have and then the potential that we have here.
Well, damn, I wish I would have ended on that. But
We're not done? We got more?
I just have a few more questions for you.
Yeah.
6 more questions for you, actually. Do you mind?
Sure.
Okay, so quickly, if you were a real estate investor, I don't know if you invest in real estate or not, but if you were, what would you, and you're looking for kind of the buy and hold strategy, the long-term plan, do you have a certain area you would invest in?
Well, I have to admit, I'm not an investor. I mean, in terms of St. Louis, suburban growth is not over here by any means. So you look at places that do have good school districts, like Kirkwood is its own town. It's a suburb kind of, but it's a real town. Go west of there to Baldwin and some of these places. I think they're great places to invest. It's hard to see 50 years from now. I don't know, 10, 20 years. They're going to be great places to live.
What about in the city?
In the city, you have to look at the central corridor, I think. I think there are some troubled spots, unfortunately, south of this, the south side of the city. When you get down to, Dutchtown, Marine Villa, and the far south, where jobs have disappeared. Basically, there aren't manufacturing jobs across South City like there used to be. So the growth you're seeing is in healthcare and education, and we have great anchor institutions with the universities in town and the hospital complex. So anywhere along the central corridor, I think, is a great place. So they're good places to invest. I'm
shocked that basically your first answer was Kirkwood and Baldwin.
No, I know. It's like, but you have to be, you got to be honest. Those have got to be the most stable, predictable markets. I'm not sure there's a buck to be made there. You're not going to, these aren't places that are regenerating, right? So there are places in the city where you can still buy empty homes for $40,000 and you may be able to renovate it and sell them for $300,000, so there's more opportunity in the city, but you have to be, honest about the type of region we're in.
Lastly, I asked my same 5 questions to everybody, Alex. You ready?
These are quick fire?
These are a little more personal type of questions,
Sure.
Who lives under your roof?
Well, there were some mice living under my roof recently. I think I won't tell you how many I've gotten rid of.
Yeah, it's embarrassing.
So other than invading animals, we have myself and my wife, Katie, and our son, Oscar, daughter, Lucy, and another daughter, Harriet.
Harriet.
So 6 years old, 4 years old, and 8 months old.
Okay, congratulations. No pets other than the mice?
No pets other than the mice.
See, that's part of the problem. You got to have a cat or something.
No,
I can't support getting a cat, actually.
No.
Okay, so where are you your best?
God, I don't know. Let's hope it's when I'm with my kids and just enjoying St. Louis, I think. So,
okay.
Because I get annoyed. I'm not... It's hard to be happy when dealing with, the challenges that we face, because there are real challenges and they're tough. And so I'm not at my best when I'm doing that. I mean, maybe I am, but it's not as enjoyable. So.
Yeah, you're super good at what you're doing.
Yeah, but I don't.
I should not even allow
easy.
people to answer about when I'm with their kids, because everyone. So, okay. Other than your own, what is your favorite blog or podcast? That's tough because you read a lot of them, it sounds like.
I know. No, there's a bunch. I love, here's one that I really like just because it's fun to read. There's one called, it's a blog done by Nikki Dwyer, who's just a resident of the Central West End, and it's called, and she does kind of these little, snippets of life in the Central West End. So some of it's like holiday decorating windows, and some of it's development, but some of it's flowers in the spring and stuff. So I love seeing kind of that slice of life kind of thing. And there are a number of blogs around St. Louis that does that.
Cool. What is your guilty pleasure?
Good beer, I guess. Okay. So you name it. We're down the road from Schlafly, Urban Chestnut, Four Hands, Perennial. St. Louis is in the middle of a beer renaissance, and I'm taking advantage of it. So,
do you have a favorite beer? A favorite local beer?
Probably, yeah. I mean, the standard is the Urban Chestnut Wingnut.
That's the beer for you,
more than anything else. But yeah, but everything from Four Hands recently has been amazing. So,
yeah, I had their like peanut butter chocolate milk stout or something.
Yeah, I've not had that.
It was really good.
I'm sure it's great.
Okay, who is your mentor, and how have you thanked them? And we'll end on that.
Oh man, if anyone out there is looking to mentor a young man such as myself,
someone had to mentor you. You mean you're on the right path? You're doing great things.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've had just some great friends. I was on a cycling team in college, and just with 3 other guys who were just outstanding, kind of professionally and with their families and stuff, and they've been great. So I kind of look to them maybe as role models, and then I search far and wide. I mean, there's some great developers in town that I talk to all the time who
like real estate developers.
Ideas. Yeah, and a lot of them. So I kind of don't want to point out.
Sure, no, that's fine.
Yeah.
So you don't necessarily have one person you would call your mentor.
No, probably not.
Like me and old Billy used to meet every Tuesday for a ham sandwich.
Now I feel like I should. Like I said, if anyone's
okay.
Adopt a blogger. Let's talk.
Well, I appreciate you coming on. I'm sure everyone's going to be happy to hear it. And thanks to Joey, our producer, Joey Vosevich. And we'll tune in next time for the next great guest and next St. Louis real estate update. Thanks. Take care.
Yeah, thanks.